Afternoon you again. Very sorry because kind of a technical issues. And before I start, may I wish you a very happy, healthy New Year 2021. And we hope that we will have a very productive year, even though still we are struggling with these problems, pandemic issues. And even with that, let's continue with our normal routine, our studies and all that. Uh, I think we were basically discussing money last week, and I was basically, I think, planning to have a discussion on some another thing. Anyway, have you received the latest handout, lecture number 3? Did you get it? The recent one?
Yes,
Okay. There again, I think I gave you a kind of a reminder that we should do something else this week to start with. Can anyone suggest what we are supposed to do at the beginning today? I think last lecture also I mentioned this at the end. Does anyone remember?
budget speech, sir.
Budget speech, exactly, yes. Were you able to look at the budget speech? I think I shared you the link and also the copy of the budget I shared with you. Were you able to look at? I think I asked you to look at some of the proposals related to the financial sector, isn't it? Financial sector and the banking sector broadly. Uh, can we have a kind of a very brief discussion on that? At least, did you go through and try to identify any proposals related to the banking sector or the financial sector? Does anyone want to, open the forum, give an answer? There were only a few proposals related to the financial sector. Maybe we can just list them out if you can remember or if you have jotted down some of these proposals. Yes, anyone want to give any feedback? What are the key proposals related to the financial sector? I see many of you have, at least some of you have said that you have went through it. Does anyone want to give any answer? I see some of the names here. Tarini, did you get any view from the budget speech reading by reading it? Asma, I hope you can hear me. If you have it, actually, even now you can open it and see what are the proposals related to the banking sector. Yes, Asma, regarding tax policy, national security, investment, savings, tourism, yes. Can you suggest any particular proposals? Okay, right. Kaushalya, she has given an answer. Kaushala, maybe. Personal income tax will apply on earnings from employment, rent, interest, dividends, or any other. Okay, these are tax proposals. Withholding tax on rent, interest, dividends, and pay tax on interest have been abolished. Okay, that is also one of the proposals. Especially, I think they are what is relevant is interest on dividends. Dividends are kind of a cash flow for stock investments. So the this withholding tax uh, have been abolished. And yes, and those with earnings exceeding 250,000 per month from income sources such as salaries, rent, interest, and if wish to pay taxes on a monthly basis, such individuals would advise their respective workplaces. Oh, okay, there are tax-related proposals. What you have uh, pointed out here. Right. Okay. That is this is an important proposal, merging finance companies that have not been cancelled by the CBS with the parent company. I think you are basically extracting directly from the budget speech. That's fine. Any other ideas? I see some couple of answers here. Does anyone having any especially related to the banking sector? Does anyone want to? How about others? Seems you have not done the task that I expected. So I really appreciate if you can do so when I request you to do. Right, and another answer from Kaushala, the need for merging finance companies in a way that strengthens the companies. Merging companies, I think the same idea, mergers of finance companies. I'll come back to those answers again. How about others? Are there any answers, especially related to the banking sector? What you have already mentioned, I think, related to non-banking sector. Does anyone have any thing on the banking sector? Hmm? Savings and investment. Okay. What do you have on savings, Harini? Any particular proposals? Kaushala, yes, decreasing the loan rates. That is also a relevant answer, I think, for the banking sector. Let's come back to those answers again. Related to savings, what do you mean by savings? Any particular proposal? Housing loans for government servants from banks, yes. Good. I see a couple of people, they have done a good job. About the Samurdhi Bank, there are some points, yes. Amansa to promote investment in the housing market through Sri Lankan real estate investment trust, yes. Rates regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission, yes. That is, there is also a proposal related to that. That is for the real estate market. FD rates decrease. Was there any particular proposal on FD rates? Or is there, yes, decrease in interest rates, I think, as Nalindra mentioned. Simplify taxes on capital gains, yes, that is also a relevant answer. Any more? Okay, shall I basically look at, there's one more answer from NETMA, proposed to release the interest income of welfare societies and institutions from income taxes. I think that is related to income taxes mainly. Uh, LC bans for special imports. Yes, I think it's more than a budget proposal. I think it came before the budget proposal, budget speech. Still, some of the imports are not permitted to import. Right. Now, let me share some extracts from the budget speech that I have basically copied from the budget speech. Can you see my slides? Can you? Can somebody talk, please?
Yes.
Okay. Now here in these slides, I have extracted. There are a number of proposals. I think some of you have pointed out some proposals related to tax policy and tax and the financial sector. Yes. And I thought I would pick some of the key proposals in the budget speech because we have to know these things. The reason is uh, the budget is applicable or effective for this year, 2021. So in this year, there would be some of the changes happening in the financial sector due to these budget proposals. There could be tax changes, there could be some institutional changes. So some changes could happen due to the budget proposals. And that has some impact on us. And also, if you are working, I always mention this to you, you should know what's happening because you can't be, working as a very, you know, uh, blind person. You should know what's happening around, especially in the financial sector. And if it is particularly on the banking sector, that affects most of us. So we have to know these things. So that is the purpose. That's the need that we have to have some understanding on this. So that's why I encourage you to look at not only the budget speech. Time to time, there could be some new proposals coming in. New changes are coming in the financial sector. So you have to have some understanding about these changes because that will change the environment that we work and also that we study. So that's the purpose. Now, if you look at the banking sector, there are many number of proposals related to credit facilities because this budget, since it was presented in the middle of the threat of coronavirus pandemic, and as we are basically having economic difficulties, I think you are aware this year we are yet to record a negative growth rate in the economy. This year, in the sense 2020, last year, even 2021, we expect some recovery, but that is also at the current conditions. We know there is some uncertainty related to the recovery process. The economy will recover, but we don't know exactly at which rate, at which magnitude. So there are some uncertainties going on because of the current situation. So the government's main idea when they were present in the budget to give some boost to the economy. As you are already aware, the central bank has relaxed or reduced the monetary policy and its interest rates to a historically low levels. Now most of the interest rates are at very low levels, historically low levels. We have done this thing as the central bank to support the economy because we need some activities to happen for the recovery process of the economy. So if you look at the budget also from the fiscal side, budget proposals are coming from the fiscal sector. We call it fiscal policy. The government is basically managing the economy through fiscal policy. The central bank is helping the government to manage the economy through monetary policy. So monetary policy practice or the activities measures are basically handled by the central bank. Fiscal measures or fiscal policy related measures are basically formulated and implemented by the government. So in the budget speech, there are a lot of policies that can be implemented from the fiscal authorities with the coordination of the monetary authorities. So banking sector policies are like that. They propose as the fiscal policy maker, they can propose, and the central bank and the financial sector in collaboration with the government can implement these policies. So as I said, most of these policies for this year are aiming at promoting economic activities through credit. We already know in the economy, credit is much needed. Credit is the source of activities, investment activities. We have seen from our previous discussions. The stakeholders in the economy, they might not have required funds with them for them to, undertake their activities. So the financial sector is basically supporting their activities through channeling funds. So we have realized the fund channeling or the the link between the deficit sector and the surplus sector in the economy, the financial sector, can happen in two ways. We discuss one is through markets, where you can directly go to the stock market or bond market and do activities. That is one way. And also we discussed there's another way you can do it through indirect way, which means through the banking sector. Or broadly you can call them as intermediaries, remember? So intermediaries, they provide credit. So banks are intermediaries, they provide credit. So if you look at the budget speech this year, there are a lot of proposals related to this intermediation. Right? I hope you remember this term. We discussed the term a couple of times, intermediation. So intermediation is all about financial intermediation is all about providing credit. Right? Hope you remember we covered these things, but I'm just repeating. So credit facilities, loan facilities are promoted in the budget speech. I think some of you have already mentioned these things. So if you look at a couple of proposals related to credit facilities, uh, there is a proposal to reduce the interest rate on housing property loans of the public servants uh, as loans given as housing loans and advances. So for them, the interest rate is kept at 7%. So when you say the maximum of 7% means this is a cap. We call interest rate caps. So the financial institutions cannot increase rates more than that. So which means for the government servants, which public servants, they can have a mortgage loan, housing loan at a rate of 7%. So this proposal is in the budget. And there's another proposal, kind of a support to the real sector by way of supporting facilities to them. Now, there are contractors who are engaged in the government sector projects. So these contractors, they have kind of bills from the government. Sometimes the government bills are paid with a lag. For example, if you provide a service to a government, let's say you build a road as a private contractor registered with the government. So when you do it, you don't get money then and there. There is a kind of a lag. So during this lag, maybe your cash flow could be affected. So to support that, the government has proposed a mechanism the banks can provide 90% of that value uh, as a loan to these contractors. Right? So with that, the contractor's cash flow would be secure. So later on, the government would settle. We know government is also tight with financial uh, tightness. They are also having some issues with the financial issues, financial uh, kind of a uh, inadequacy of income revenue to make their payments on a timely basis. So this process would also help the government to manage their cash. And also another proposal related to credit facilities is providing some uh, support to the youth. Youth means basically people who have studied, especially in the vocational institutes. So, if vocational training is completed and they want to start their own business, own project, you call them as startups. The word startup means they are actually new projects. In some countries, we use the term ventures. So these are ventures. Startup capital means venture capital for people who are starting initially. So you have to give some support. So considering the cost of funds provided for startup capital, which means the interest cost of funds means interest uh, provided by banks and finance agencies, they are given some uh, kind of a concession. What is the concession? When calculating taxes, that can be treated as an expenditure because these banks, they are liable to pay certain taxes. So these taxes are sometimes when you pay taxes, there are some adjustments can be made to the tax. Obviously, if you have taken a loan, interest cost is a kind of a adjuster. So you can deduct that interest cost. Now, in this case, if you are giving a loan to a kind of a startup, that cost of fund or the interest cost can be considered as a uh, expenditure when calculating the tax. So that can be deducted. So all in all, you don't need to keep that in, word by word. The idea is for startups to promote the startup credit, which means to give some facilities to them. The government has introduced some adjuster in the calculation of taxes. Tourism sector. We know due to the pandemic, it was the most severely hit sector in the economy. I think the tourism sector is the most affected sector. Other economic activities gradually they are reviving, but tourism sector we know they have a huge problem when the tourists are not allowed to come, especially to operators, the hotels, other tourist service providers. They are in trouble. And for the tourism sector, at the moment, there is a debt moratorium. Some other sectors are also eligible for this, but tourism sector is uh, given a special support by way of a debt moratorium. So under this debt moratorium, there are some certain concessions and recovery is delayed. And also some refinancing facilities are provided by the central bank, and the government has proposed in the budget to extend those facilities up to September 2021. So it's an extension of the uh, concessions given to the tourism sector already, which means to give them some support in terms of their credit loan servicing. And also the government is proposing to provide a kind of a treasury guarantee of 50%. Treasury guarantee means out of their loan, the treasury is guaranteeing like 50%. Even though the tourism sector does not pay their loans back, uh, they will be paying back after some time after September 2021. The government is giving some guarantee, which means there won't be any default. That is the guarantee, 50% guarantee. So if there's a default, the government would pay. That is the idea. 50% would be covered by the government. So that is also a credit related facility in the banking sector. And also someone also mentioned this Samurdhi related proposal. The government is proposing to allocate about 1,000 million as a government contribution to provide credit facilities through the Samurdhi banks and other state banks. So Samurdhi banks and state banks providing credit, those banks means basically for the MSMEs, which means small and medium sectors, because actually for the micro sector, some of the banks are basically serving the micro sector. MSME means micro, small, and medium size enterprises. They are especially the micro part is supported through the Samurdhi Bank. So providing these facilities means supporting the grassroots level of the economy. And also this 1,000 million is also used to implement a special insurance scheme through the insurance corporation. So insurance is also a product that we discuss under our subject. So the government is also kind of proposing a special insurance scheme for those who are receiving these facilities. And if you look at the policy wise, what I have basically discussed, some of the things related to specific loan facilities. But broadly, policy wise, the government is proposing to amend the banking law. So the Banking Act is the banking law. Currently, the Banking Act is very kind of a restrictive act. So commercial banks are only allowed to do commercial banking right now. Okay, commercial banking business is very clearly defined in the banking. But the government is proposing to diversify the financial sector. The banks can perform as hello, yes.
Hello. Yeah, I'm having difficulties trying to find the note for week 3. It's like the folder is empty.
How about others? Have you received the other people?
No, sir. I haven't also received the week 3 note.
All right, maybe it's not uploaded. Is that so? Others also?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, don't worry, because I'm not going to basically discuss week 3 note today, right? I'll check with them. And these slides are anyway not available in your week 3 note. Okay. So I'll be sharing this thing after our discussion. Today, we are still working with the week 2 handout. You have the week 2, right? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sir. This tune, is it the week 3 or week 2?
This is week 3, what I am presenting, but
All
it
right.
is not shared yet. This one.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Week 3, you will get something else on money too. But after this discussion also, I will share these slides with you. Okay. I hope that helps. Okay. So commercial banks are given or will be given the opportunity to act as investment banks with the amendment to the banking law. That is also a proposal to diversify the activities in the banking sector. Okay, so that's an important area, the diversification aspect. And also, this budget very clearly highlights the need for development banking. Okay, so in Sri Lanka, development banking actually development banking means providing credit facilities for expansion of economic activities or economic development. So history in if you look at the history, we have had some development banks. For example, National Development Bank is now it's a commercial bank, but in the past it was a development bank. DFCC, that is also Development Finance Corporation, you call it DFCC. Earlier it was a sorry, development bank. That is also now a commercial bank. So we don't have much of development banking activities, or rather development banks to support national development activity. So for that matter, the government is proposing establishing a National Development Banking Corporation, NDBZ. Now it is nothing more than that. It's a kind of a amalgamation of existing institutions. Now we already have some institutions, especially two housing banks and also Pradeshya Samvardhana Bank (RDB). These three banks will be amalgamated to create the National Development Banking Corporation. So it will be happening this year as the proposal. SMIB, HDFC, and the RDB will be merged together to create a development banking corporation. So the task of the bank would be to support the provide the long-term financing, which means a part of the development activity. Okay? That is also one important proposal. Related to those are the major proposals related to banking sector. There are some related things in the tax proposals as well. I saw some of you have already raised them, but I'm just purely looking at from the sector specific proposals. Right? And if you look at the non-bank sector, I think again some of you have already pointed out these things. Non-banking sector means where we have these registered finance companies, or sometimes you call it licensed finance companies, LFCs. That is the word we use right now. Right? Now, these finance companies in Sri Lanka, we observe some of the problems in these finance companies. I think you are also aware some of the companies have encountered some problems, liquidity issues, some capital issues, solvency issues. Some have actually closed down. There are some, areas of, weaknesses in the non-banking sector. So the government, the central bank, both are paying some special attention to the non-bank sector. So one of the important aspects of non-bank sector revival is merging. Some of you have already mentioned this term. Merge means we use the term merge to identify consolidation. This is the word we use in finance. Consolidation. So consolidation means you basically, amalgamate, merge few institutions to create a strong institution or large institution. Usually large institutions are much stronger. So when you amalgamate small ones, that will create a large, strong institution. Now, what are the proposals in the current budget? The, the overall idea, the budget says, okay, there should be consolidation. Okay, that is broadly accepted. And for that, I think some of you have copied from the budget. The budget speech says we have, sometimes back have done this thing, that thing to promote this merger. And the government wants to have this again. So one of the proposals under merging or consolidation is merge the finance companies under commercial banks with the bank. Okay. So if there is a finance company under the bank, some banks are having finance companies. So the proposal is merge that finance company to the bank. So after that, there won't be any finance company that is also becoming a part of the bank. So bank will expand or the strength. If you look at, I think I don't want to mention some names. Some banks are having their own finance companies under the same color, same logo, and all that. So the proposal is you merge that finance company with the bank. Okay. And also there are some companies with some issues, problems. The central banks is very closely monitoring, trying to resolve. So as a result, the central bank has not cancelled their permit or the license up to now. So the proposal is if there are some, such finance companies, subsidiary finance companies, that can be also merged with the parent company. So in a group of companies, there is a parent company. So let's say under that parent company, a particular finance company is in under problem. There are, I don't want to mention names, but in this country there are large entities. You call them as conglomerates. So under that conglomerate or the parent company, there are small companies. The finance company can be such a small company. So the proposal is that has to be absorbed by the parent company. Modalities we don't know yet because it's only a proposal, but that is there. And also the budget very clearly indicates that the non-bank financial institution supervision done by the central bank has to be restructured. Right? There are also a kind of a proposal to do. The government thinks there could be some improvements introduced to the supervision mechanism of the finance companies. So as a result, to create a kind of a strong regulatory organizational structure for the finance companies. So that is also a proposal. And if you look at the markets, financial markets, those are what I have discussed related to institutions, right? Banks, non-banks, etc. Insurance companies, etc. There are some specific proposals related to the markets as well. So one such proposal is commercial banks can go and invest in our international sovereign bonds. So international sovereign bonds means these are not issued locally, right? These are government bonds, but they are called as dollar bonds, issued in foreign currency, or sometimes you call them as euro bonds. Dollar means the even though you call it euro bonds, that's actually a foreign bond, dollar bond. So those are issued in international markets. The government is proposing those bonds can be purchased by the licensed commercial banks, our own commercial banks, can go and buy, subject to a minimum $100 million. So $100 million means is a large amount. So they can buy those bonds. If they buy, government is proposing some of the incentives. What are these incentives? Under central bank regulations, up to 3 years, there are some regulatory concessions are proposed, which means as an investment, they have to keep some provisions considering the risk. So the government is proposing that provisions can be suspended for about 3 years, which means to give some boost to commercial banks to invest. And also the income, interest income, normally it is taxable interest income. So government is proposing the profits and interest income to be exempt from the taxes. So kind of a tax exemption, which means you don't charge taxes on the profits for the income. So that is a kind of a boost to commercial banks to invest in these bonds, Sri Lankan bonds. Another proposal to pay $2 above the normal exchange rate when people send remittances through the banking channel. We know a lot of people work outside as expats or migrant workers in various countries. Sorry. The government is proposing when they send their foreign exchange earnings and when it is converted locally, it is converted under the exchange rate. So government is proposing an additional 2 rupees per dollar to be paid on such remittances. Right? So it's a kind of a boost to attract foreign exchange. And also some of you also mentioned this thing, dividends on foreign companies is proposed to be exempted from the taxes. So that exemption will happen if the dividends are reinvested in the business. Now we know dividends are kind of a cash income received by shareholders. So if that cash income is basically reinvested, which means they are using it for expansion, then there won't be any taxes. So tax will be exempted. Or if that money is invested in the money market, stock market, or international sovereign bond market, any of these investments will be tax exempted for 3 years. So what is the idea behind? Both these proposals are aiming at to attract foreign exchange. So if you allow remittances to come in and to be converted at a higher rate, so that is encouraging remittances. If you are not taxing dividends of foreigners, which means they are willing to invest, and that is also a source of foreign exchange. So those are supporting the foreign exchange. And I think I saw this in your chat box as well. Someone has suggested this thing as well. To promote savings, we know, remember savings, this is source of what? Surplus units, right? Surplus unit is created through savings. So to create savings, to support savings, the government is basically giving some tax exemption, kind of a adjuster when you calculate the personal income tax. So when you, let's say you are earning such a salary and you are liable to pay income tax. So that income tax, when you pay, you have to, calculate and see whether you are liable to pay. So if you are liable, you can do some deductions based on your medical insurance, interest on housing loans, investments in government securities, shares in companies. Likewise, up to 100,000 a month can be adjusted in your tax calculation. So the reason for that is to encourage private saving. So when people will have more disposable income if you reduce the tax by way of giving some exemptions, right? So this is to promote savings. So likewise, there are various proposals related to certain areas. I have not taken particularly tax-related proposals in this discussion because tax are in common, but there are some tax-related linkages to the financial sector as well. But here, what I have done is basically the proposals that are directly affecting the financial sector or the banking sector in this discussion. And I have given you some references as well. When you have these, you can basically click and see these are some published documents, some in some papers. For example, in Ceylon FT, Daily FT, and also in these two documents, these are some budget reports. Now, various companies, especially the rating companies and accounting firms, auditing firms, they are doing budget analysis because budget is very important for them because tax policy changes will have an impact. So a lot of auditing companies, accounting firms like PwC, KPMG, they are doing their own analysis on budget, their impacts on specific sectors, things like that. So these are also available in public domain. So when I ask you, okay, look at the budget speech and come up with some proposals related to the financial sector, you could easily look at these, budget highlights. If you are really lazy to look at the entire budget, to read it, that is also a very easy task. If you find out by certain, keywords, you will get an answer. But even if you think it is, kind of a painstaking activity, some activity with some effort, what you could do, you can simply look at the websites, Google, and see what are the key highlights of the budget. So you can do it even now. So I'm just giving these links for you to have. So all in all, what I want to tell, as I said, the budget this year, 2021, there are some specific important proposals relevant to us, the banking sector, non-bank sector, markets, and all. So you have to have some understanding if you are basically studying this subject. We don't know, even that could be in your exam papers, right? Some relevant questions could be there related to the budget speech. Okay, let's close it, and I'll share these slides with you. Then you can have some reference to those slides in your leisure time. Yes, someone has said promoting Colombo and Hambantota Harbour for international trading. Yes, that is also a related proposal. But the financial sector impact would be indirect there, right? We know with the expansion of economic activities, the plan is to have, Colombo port city as a kind of a financial city. So there will be, significant expansion in the financial sector. And also when we see international trade is expanding, there are also some relevant aspect to the financial sector. For example, promoting trade means it is basically expanding banking activities as well, right? You can't have trade or promote trade without the banking sector expansion. So banking sector in terms of trade finance, supporting, this freight forwarding and all that documentation. All these will be supported by the financial sector. So with that, maybe let's conclude the discussion on budget. So I really recommend you to have some understanding about these fees and proposals. Okay. With that, we can move to the uh, next discussion on our previous week's discussion, money. Let me get back to you in a minute with this money handout. You also can be prepared with the handout because there could be some additional notes that you have to take down. Can you see my slides, please? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to our previous week's discussion with that. I hope you remember we started discussing the evolution of money and we looked at the barter system. Barter system means simply direct exchange of goods without involvement of money. So as a medium of exchange, there is no any particular asset in between or a commodity under barter system. So it's a kind of a direct exchange. You exchange your surplus with another party and usually you have to have double coincidence of bonds. That was the biggest issue in the barter system, and also sometimes it's very difficult to have double coincidence because the needs might not uh, reconcile with the uh, with the other party. So that is an issue. So that led to commodity money. I remember I discussed commodity money as well. I told you here what happens to match the needs. There is an intermediate commodity came to the transaction. As we know, if there are two parties and the two parties have different needs, those needs can be only matched with an intermediate commodity. So this intermediate commodity, you call them as commodity money. And most of the time what we see is commodity money reflects some asset or a good or some thing. The value equals to the value of money. I gave you an example. If you have commodity money as gold, so gold is playing the role of money, that value of gold equals to value of money. Sometimes we use the word the intrinsic value. Intrinsic. So what is intrinsic value? The value of commodity equals the value of money. So if it is gold, so gold equals the value of money, value of gold. So this is the simple way of defining commodity money. And I told you in the history, in the early parts, people use what they could find from the from their environment, like cattle, copper shells, salt, things like those items that you can find out from your environment were used as money. So how the transaction happens? Let's say now in this earlier case, if you want to buy fish, you give grain and the transaction is direct. Now what happens? Now if you want to buy grains, you don't give fish, but instead you give a, let's say, a cover shell, right? So you give the shell that is playing as money. So you take whatever you want. And the other person, what he gets is not the fish. He gets a cover shell, which is a form of money. Now he can go anywhere and buy whatever he wants. He doesn't need to have fish. He would like to have, meat. So he can take that cover shell and take somewhere to some person who's having meat, and he can buy those meat by giving that cover shell. So I hope you simply understand how that mechanism works. Later, people replace these early type of money with some precious metal, right? So in the early stage of using precious metal as money, there was no particular kind of a guidance how to make money. So early money, there are a lot of shapes. Now here I have plotted you one. It's like a horseshoe, right? And there were like spade type money. Spade means, I hope you have seen a spade, right? So it's like this. So that is also one shape. Later on, when the technology improves, they try to make it a very smooth type of coin. So the shape was basically earlier most of the things without having a particular shape, but later on they change it to a kind of a particular shape. Mostly the circular type coin. So this coin, what I highlight here, is considered as the very first coin of the world. So this coin was found under the Greek civilization. So Greek civilization means is about 6th BC, 6th century, right, before Christ. So when the Indian society, so the Indian civilization was there in the 6th century. I hope if you are having some interest to the history, you might know. Parallelly, there was a Greek civilization. people think when Lord Buddha was, preaching his beliefs, his religion, his philosophy in India, in uh, Greek, Greece, in Athens, there were philosophers like Aristotle, Socrates. So during their time, we see these coins. This the first coin of the world. You call it Athenian now. Athenians means Athens. Athens is in Greece. So if you look at this picture, there is a kind of emblem or a symbol of owl. So in Greek society, owl is considered as the symbol of prosperity. So they created coins using such symbols. Later on in coins, you would see the portrait of the king, portrait of the ruler, right? Likewise. Now this coin minting, which started in the Western society, spread to even to other countries as well. We know, I told you last week also, in India, we have these coins. The history, if you look at the history, you will see evidence for these gold coins, silver coins. In China, you find these coins. So this coin, this next one, this is from a Chinese civilization. So you have noticed this, there is a hole in this coin. Why is that? So they were carrying these coins using a kind of a thread. So as I said, it was spread to China, India, even in our case in Sri Lanka also. If you look at our history, we find these coins, right? Especially during Anuradhapura kingdom. During that time, we find evidence for foreign coins. And a lot of excavations and in these archaeological sites, we find evidence for coins. Especially during Polonnaruwa period, we find evidence for coins minted here actually in Sri Lanka. If you look at this, the last one, this is coming from Polonnaruwa era, which means 12th century, where we had created or minted these coins to highlight the portrait of the king. So these coins, actually even today we have these coins. If you look at from the very early stage of the primitive stage of the human civilization to today, we have these coins because it is a kind of a reflection of easy way of transacting or creating money using the precious metal. Now the metal content that that they have used have changed. Sometimes in the past, uh, as I said, uh, the principle value of commodity equals value of money. Exactly, it was that. But later on, especially during, you look at 15th century, 16th century, during this time, what has happened? The commodities, the metal, gold and silver, those reserves actually depleted. Right? Gold and silver, you have to, get from mines. Right? So these are resources depleting, and you cannot renew that in a shorter period of time. These are non-renewable, resources in a way that will take millions of years. So as a result, what has happened during this 15th and 16th, those time? So some rulers, some kings, they have, devalued these currencies. Devalue means you reduce the value of commodity compared to value of money. Right? Let's say if you have 100 uh, penny coin, that 100 penny coin does not have gold equal to that 100 penny. It is less than that, which means you are devaluing the money. So that is also visible in our history of money. Now, even though this commodity money was there for many years, for many centuries, and people have used those metal based coins as a medium of exchange, and also even though there are a lot of advantages, uh, during the process of evolution, people have seen this commodity money is also problematic, right? We have seen barter system is problematic, and as a result, commodity money was introduced. During the use, people realize even the commodity money is, simply difficult to use for a long while. Now, one problem we have already seen. I told you devalue. Devalue means the value is eroding over time. Okay, that is one of the issues. But other than that, there were some other uh, problems as well. We'll come back to that in the next slide. But before move to that, now we were talking about commodity money since pre-modern history to around, let's say, 15th, 16th century. Right? So roughly 2000 years we have a history of commodity money. But at the same time, we see some evidence in between for paper money. So paper money we see in our history about 7th century we see paper money. So 7th century means a lot of people were heavily using commodity money actually, right? But still in places like in China, they have created paper money. So as a result, we consider Chinese people, or China is the first country to introduce paper money. Why they have introduced paper money? Because the problem of commodity money. I'll come back to those problems in the next slide. So here we have a kind of a sample of these earliest Chinese money notes or currency notes. It's a kind of a promissory note, right? What is the promise here? The promise to pay. So people deposited commodity money with some people. Let's say people deposit gold coins because they are very bulky to carry and it's very risky to carry, and people deposited that money with someone, and instead they issued a promissory note. What is the promissory note? When they come back, that promissory note, that deposited money will be paid back. Deposited gold coin or silver coins will be paid back. So this promissory note is a kind of a paper currency or paper note. So people could use this for transactions. You can take this promissory note to someone else and you can buy something else using it. So this principle, using a paper with some, authority, is the origin of paper money. So this can be seen later in the European countries as well. By around 12th, 13th, 14th century, we see with the expansion of trade in Europe, these banknotes or paper notes came into action. So you call them as bills of exchange. Right? Bills of exchange means what is used in international trade. Rather than exchanging money or commodity money, people use these type of bills or promissory notes as money. Okay. So you can see some early signs of paper money even before 12th century, that was in China. So I was telling this paper money came out because of the problems of commodity money. What are the problems of commodity money? Here I have given you a list of commodity money. I already mentioned to you deterioration. So the value is deteriorating. The resources are also deteriorating. Illiquidity. Illiquidity means you can't simply, convert into cash because it's, don't forget, it's, a commodity. It's gold, it's silver, it's bronze. So you have to convert it. So that issue is there. Bulky. I told you, you have to carry these, in carts. Maybe you have to connect them with a, kind of thread to carry because it's huge, bulky. Later on, actually, the people improved the quality of coins, but early stage, it was kind of a bulk. Indivisibility. Sometimes a large value coin, if you divide it, it's becoming a kind of a disadvantages if you divide. So if you make small coins, could be disadvantage. So that indivisibility is there. And high opportunity cost is there because I already mentioned to you commodity value is equal to the value of money. So you could use such valuable commodity for something else. So some other value creation. So that those are some problems. Those problems led to paper money, right? I already mentioned to you. The paper money in general, we call it as fiat money, right? Paper money is simply fiat money. Now here, as I said, this is paper money. It was a kind of a promise to pay, right? How do you make it a very authenticated or acceptable note? You can put or you can endorse some signatures there, which means giving some promise to pay. So when you give that signature, let's say by as the government officials, you are giving that signature, giving that endorsement. So what does that mean? You are giving some authority to the paper. So that authority, you can call it fiat. So the fiat is, in other words, the value assigned by the government by its order. So even a simple piece of paper can be converted into a valuable money. Let's say you have a simple half sheet. It's only, maybe 4 or 5 rupees. Very simple. That paper, simple paper, can be converted into money if the government is giving its order, the fiat, to say this is money. So that's an important aspect of fiat money or paper money. The value of money is not coming from any commodity. It's coming from the government fiat. So as a result, we can say money value is not derived from any intrinsic value. Right? Intrinsic means the commodity value equals the value of money. So here, there's no commodity. It's only the government order that the paper has some value. And also there's no guarantee that you can convert it. Now, for example, if you have $100 note or whatever, can you, let's say $50 note, can you convert into, gold? There's no convertibility. You can buy gold, but you can't convert into gold. So there's no convertibility of such fiat money. The most important thing of the fiat money, I told you the issues came out because of these problems, deterioration, illiquidity, bulkiness, and all that. But later on, fiat money got popular because of this reason. That is the most important reason for the popularity of fiat money, popularity of paper money. What is that? Now, commodity money, let's say these gold coins or these Athenian nowls, these precious metal, you can't expand as you want. In other words, when the economy needs more money, you can't expand it in a rapid way. Why people need more money? When people have more economic activities, when people need more money to buy purchases. In other words, when prices are going up, people would need more money to acquire goods and services. Commodity money cannot match that. You can't match it because I told you it's limited resources. Commodity is limited. So naturally, under commodity money system, the expansion of money will be limited because your commodity, the amount of commodity and the reserves or resources are limited. That is the one of the major weaknesses of this commodity money system. But if you look at the fiat money system, you don't have that limitation. So in the fiat money system, it's the government decision to print money and increase the money supply. Even you can't do that without any, fundamentals. There should be. So talk about those fundamentals later. But compared to a commodity money system, the government can expand its money supply. It can expand the money supply to match with the expansion of the economy and the output. So after 16th century, which means after creating the central banks in 17th century, this fiat money became very popular because it can be used to facilitate the growing transactions. So when transactions are expanding, the fiat money can be used to support those transactions. In other words, the government can print money very easily to support the economic activity. There are some issues, problems, limitations, but this is possible by a government. So fiat money became very popular. And if you look at the history of fiat money, paper money, I already mentioned to you in China, 7th century, we have seen some emergence or some usage of fiat money. But fiat money, currency or paper currency became very popular, I already mentioned to you, in 17th century. In 17th century in London. So London was the center of Europe. And it's the main financial center in the Western world, London. So in London, there were people called goldsmiths. Goldsmiths, right? Now, goldsmiths, they are like, people who are dealing in gold. If you Google, still you will see there's a company called Goldsmith coming from this old era. So that company is more than 400 years old. So their role is basically to create money. I mean, the historical goldsmith, they created money using gold or other metal reserves. That's why you call them as goldsmiths. So these goldsmiths in London, they developed modern money and banking practices in 17th century. How it has happened? Now I told you earlier also, at that point, commodity money was used by many countries, especially in Europe. And I already mentioned to you, countries use money for trading. So during that time, trading was the most important economic activity in the Western world. 15th, 16th, 17th centuries means the Western countries tried to expand their trade. We know why they have invaded countries, why they made some countries as their colonies to expand the trade. Through expanding trade, they accumulated wealth. Wealth in the form of gold or silver reserves. Those are the money. But I already mentioned to you that money is very difficult to handle. Large quantities, storage, transportation, security, illiquidity, all these issues were there. And as a result, I told you in 7th century in China, they developed a model, kind of a paper money model. And the same was basically reinvented in the 17th century by the goldsmiths. So what they have done, they have accepted metal reserves for the customers. Let's say a person is having, 100 gold coins. It's very risky for him to transport it. It's very risky to carry, difficult to carry. So what he could do, he could deposit these metal reserves, coins, with a gold smith. So goldsmith accepted those metal reserves and they issued a promissory note for that money deposited with the goldsmith. So if you look at this picture on the right hand side, this is a kind of a promissory note. What is the promissory note? They have accepted gold coins. They have issued a promissory note. What is the promise here? When they return the promissory note, we will give you back the gold. That is the promise. So that is the origin of modern paper money in Europe. So these promissory notes were actually payable on demand. Payable on demand means when you come back with the promissory note, when you submit, which means you redeem it, you can get your gold reserves back. The beautiful thing is not only that, these promissory note could be traded among others. You don't need to come back to the goldsmith to encash your gold. If you have the promissory note, you can sell it back to someone else. And person who's having the promissory note with him will be eligible to get the metal reserves from the goldsmith. Not only that, so that is basically the exchange part, right? Not only that, goldsmiths allowed people to borrow from them, which means goldsmiths gave loans to their customers by keeping these gold reserves. So you keep some amount of gold with you and you give another amount of money to someone means you are creating more money as credit. So goldsmiths are the first layers in money creation. How they created money? They accepted gold. Instead, they issued loans to their customers. So that is new money based on credit. I already mentioned to you, promissory note was developed as an assignable instrument. Assignable instrument means you can sell it to someone else. So the ultimate owner of the promissory note will have the right to claim for gold from the goldsmith. So I mentioned few important points here. Goldsmiths in London, they develop modern banking practices and money through their activities. What are the activities? They accepted deposits in gold and they issued paper money as promissory notes. That's one thing. Second thing, goldsmiths allow to borrow their customers by depositing their golds. They against that they could borrow money. So that is creation of credit as new money. So that is also one of the important development of the goldsmiths. Third one, I already mentioned, they develop assignable instruments. Assignable means you can sell or transact such instruments with some other party. Okay? That is also very important. Now, during this period, as we have seen, goldsmith they originated money. Not only goldsmiths, some other institutions also started doing that. Now, goldsmith originally started accepting gold and issuing notes, but people saw it as a lucrative business, a profitable business. It's very common no, if someone is having a profitable business in one area, others will also do the same. Like a small, let's say, kottu kada, right? You start a kottu kada and it becomes a success. Others will also do the same. So same thing happened in London. Goldsmith, goldsmiths were successful in their business. Others also came into the same business. So what they have done, they also accepted these gold coins, issued notes. Maybe their notes were little attractive than the golds. Maybe they were giving some, kind of a discounts or whatever, some, to attract their customers. Now what has happened? Now earlier it was only one note in the system. Let's say only goldsmith note. Now in the system there are a lot of notes. Right? Different people have different notes issued by private players, private financial institutions. This is a difficult task in the economy. Why? You have to settle these things. How do you settle? You have to settle one against the other, right? So it's become a very complex thing in the economy when you have multiple types of notes. Then another important thing has happened. The notes issued by these private banks, private commercial banks, has been replaced by a single institution by the government. Governments realized when there are multiple issuers of notes in the economy, that is very difficult to settle. That complicates the economy. That complicates the banking system, financial system. To address that, the government created a new institution and gave the monopoly to issue notes. So what is this institution? Can anyone suggest? What could be this institution? Government created one single institution and gave the power of issuing money rather than allowing so many companies or financial institutions to issue money.
Central bank.
Central bank, exactly. So the word central means, as you rightly mentioned, it is the centralized authority to issue money. So that was the origin of central banks. So when these central banks were created as the monopoly, the single issuer of money, the governments enjoyed the role of central bank by way of creating money. Because during this time we know the governments, especially the Western governments, were engaged in heavy war. British government, French government, all these were engaged in war. To finance the war, they used this money printing. It was easy. Why? You only issue a note, right? So that became the central bank, government central bank's role during that time. So if you look at the origin of central banks, as we have seen just now, they emerged as private entities. Could be a private company, could be a goldsmith. But then the government acquired that role from the uh, private sector and created a new institution, that is the central bank. So these central banks, as I already mentioned, they evolved as the monopoly to issue notes, monopoly to print currency, fiat currency, and they acted as the lender of last resort, means when there is a financial panic, they helped those institutions to be resolved. Right? So this is the origin of central banks. Also, we will come back to this discussion again when we talk about central banks. But what I want to highlight here, the fiat money came out as the government acquired the function of the private players to issue money, and then the government started issuing money without having those gold deposits. Right? They don't need any deposits with them. They don't need to have any money with them, because the government has the authority to issue money. So you can observe this from history. In 1694, the Bank of England was created. That is the uh, central bank in UK. So immediate after uh, establishing the central bank in UK, they produce handwritten banknotes. Handwritten banknotes means those were written by hand. Right? Even they did not print at that time. I think printing started sometimes later in 17th century in Germany, 18th century actually, in 1700 something. So at that time, so there was no printing, I think, the technology. So they produce as handwritten notes. And these notes could be exchanged for gold or any other coinage, right? Which means you can buy using those notes. So that is the origin of fiat money. So if you look at, I discussed two things right now in the history of money, how commodity money evolved, and then how fiat money or paper money evolved. In the history of evolution of money, in the evolution of money process, the third the third type of money we can observe is actually checks. In a way, check is not money, it's the instrument. But when you use that instrument, that becomes part of money. So we know paper currency or coins can be easily stolen, and transporting is also difficult, expensive because of their bulk. Now imagine nowadays the technology is very improved, advanced. Even the coins are very light, notes are very improved, security features are there. But if you look back the past history, it's very difficult to handle this paper currency of coins. Coins were the most difficult thing. I assume you may have watched, some, teleseries related to this era. I guess you have watched this Robin Hood series, teleseries, right? You watched that, you might remember how difficult the transportation of gold coins were. Right? You have to have a cart, you have to have a chariot, you have to have a lot of security personnel's efforts. Likewise, a lot of problems are there when you transporting coins. Uh, you have to have carriages to do so. But if you can have some another kind of a instrument that can be used instead of these bulky or expensive coinage or paper notes, that would be better, easy. So as a result, to combat this problem, another step in the evolution of the payment system occurred under the modern banking practices. That is the invention of checks. Now, if you have check, you can allow transactions to take place without carrying large amounts of currency. You don't need to transport currency from one place to another place if you issue a check. And checks are issued under specific accounts, current accounts, right, or demand deposits. So that transaction in the demand deposit using checks will become part of money because that acts on behalf of money. So if you take the money supply, the composition, these demand deposits are part of money because it plays the role of money. So as a result, the introduction of checks was a major innovation in the payment system in the human civilization. Earlier checks were actually originated in the Europe and also in American financial system as well as a kind of a solution to the uh, solution that we observed for notes and coins. Another step of the evolution of money is the gold standard. Now, gold standard, this is actually can be observed in the 20th century. Right? Gold standard is an important era. So, during that era, what has happened? Most of the countries, they pegged their national currencies to a fixed quantity of gold. So it's not a type of money, it's a monetary system. So here we use the term monetary system. So countries, when they do transactions with other currencies, they use the gold standard. So their money is basically fixed to a certain quantity of gold. Let's say rupee is this much of gold. The yen is this much of gold. So it is called as gold standard. So by the late 19th century, which means, as I said, especially in the 20th century, the first half, many of the world's major currencies were fixed to a gold at a set of price per ounce under the gold standard. Especially, this became very popular after the World War I. Gold standard was considered as the most important monetary system. This was used to have stable prices. Countries thought when the gold standard is introduced, which means when you fixed your currency to a certain amount of gold, you can stabilize your prices, which means you can stabilize your inflation levels. But this was completely abolished in 1971. If you look at the monetary history of the world, 1971 is basically, you call it as the collapse of Bretton Woods arrangement. So under Bretton Woods, especially, this gold standard and stable prices were practiced. But this was collapsed in 1970s, especially with the oil crisis during that period. So after that, the gold standard was abolished from the world. But it was an important era. So keep that in mind. This is not a type of money, right? So here we discuss type of money. For example, we started with commodity money, then paper money, which was evolved as fiat money. Those are types of money, right? But the checks, as I said, it's not a type of money, it's an instrument used for money. Gold standard is a monetary system, so don't get confused with this. Then we have the electronic era, e-payment system. So especially in 20th century, we have seen electronic payments have become very popular. So it's a way of making transactions for goods and services through an electronic medium. So what has happened? Through electronic medium, you can substitute checks. You don't need to issue checks. You can do an electronic transfer. You don't need to have a kind of a payment through a check. You can do a payment through a electronic transfer. Not only checks, even the cash you can replace with electronic payments, so which becomes e-money. E-money or electronic money in the modern world, here we have given the definition, is a digital equivalent of cash. So digital, or you can call electronic equivalent of cash, stored on an electronic device. So the value is stored in an electronic device, and using that electronic device, you can transfer the value of money using electronic impulses or digital impulses. For example, a debit card. If you use a debit card, you do a transaction without having a check, without having physical cash. How do you do the transaction? Through the debit card, you get linked to your account through electronic impulses. Smart cards, probably you may have used a store value card, e-purse, sometimes you call it e-purse. They are also used to store money in electronic form. No physical involvement, right? So those are some revolutionary changes in the money, in the evolution of money. Now, electronic money, you can go a further step in modern contracts as digital money. In modern world, digital money is the most revolutionary stage. It has become popular with the technology, communications and all that. And today, through digital payments, you are only using some computer algorithm. Now, in the case of electronic money, you were using some electronic impulses, right? Today, it has gone further. Under digital money, you use some digital or computer algorithms to do a transaction as money. So it's a revolutionary development change in terms of money. So if you look at this timeline very simply from 9th uh, century, not actually 9th century, it's 90th century before Christ, or you can call it 9000 BC, people were used to have currency or money in terms of commodities. So we discussed that cattle and crops like shells, cover shells and all that, people started using these things in the very early stage of the human history. Then we introduced money in terms of metal based products. I told you base metals or precious metals were used. And then by 880, which means the Chinese story that we have been talking about, the paper currency emerged, and especially during 16th, 17th century, this paper currency transformed to a very clear fiat type of currency. So that fiat currency changed the entire architecture of world monetary history, because up to this point you need to have some value behind to create money. But after 16th century, you don't need any value to create money. It could be done with the government printing machine, the government order to print money. Nowadays, in the 20th century, 21st century, we have gone further and we have developed a situation where we have an electronic equivalence of money and digital equivalence of money. So we are simply transforming or transferring a signal or a computer message or a computer algorithm today to do a transaction. So you can see throughout our history how the money has evolved and where are we now in terms of the money as a medium of exchange, right? Now, in the next stage, next week, we are further discussing this digital money, because nowadays there are some other variations of digital money. So I'm going to spend some time next week on discussing these variants, like we have private digital money, we have central bank issued digital money, we have various modes of payments like digital wallets, e-wallets. So we have to have some further understanding. So next week, in the first half an hour, I'll be talking about some of these digital money or virtual type of money. We are talking about virtual money today to get some more understanding. And we have some past paper questions as well related to this digital money. If you look at the marking schemes and past papers, you'll see there are some questions related to digital money. So we will look at or discuss those things next week, and then we'll move to our next discussion, actually money supply. So in the first half an hour, 45 minutes, I'll be finishing the discussion on types of money and money demand, and we will be moving to our next discussion, money supply. That slide set actually I have sent to IBSL yesterday. That is the lecture slide set 3. So that you should get maybe by today, or it will be uploaded. So that will be used for the next session as well. Okay. Let's stop here. I hope you have realized that we have changed our time, right? From 1 to 3, we are earlier we had 1 to 3. Now we are actually having our classes 3:30 to 5:30. So that is our usual time slot. So from this week onwards, from 2021 onwards, we are back to our original time slot, that is 3:30, 5:30. Okay. Any questions before we wind up for the day? All clear? Right. So can we stop here then? I'll see you next week at the same time. Okay. Good night and have a good week. And have a happy new year again, 2021. Thank you.